All right, today we're cracking open one of the most chilling case files from famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, this isn't your typical haunted house story. It didn't start with moving into an old, creepy mansion or finding a cursed antique. No, this all started with a 19-year-old girl, an Ouija board, and a question that was born out of loneliness. This is the unbelievable story of the Donovan family haunting.
You know, this quote really hits home with this case. From the street, the Donovans' house was just a house, a place that's meant to be safe, a sanctuary. But this story is a terrifying reminder of what can happen when something is invited in, even unknowingly.
So let's meet the people at the center of this storm. You have the Donovans, Ted and Ellen, and their daughter, 19-year-old Patty. They just moved to a new town, and for Patty it was incredibly lonely. And in an attempt to fix that, she made a choice that would unleash absolute terror on her entire family.
Yeah, with no real friends yet and pretty strict parents, Patty felt completely isolated. She was just looking for someone, anyone, to talk to. So she brought home what she thought was just a harmless game, an Ouija board. You know, that classic tool for supposedly talking to spirits.
It all started so simply. There she is in her room, probably more bored and lonely than anything else. She puts her fingers on that little plastic planchette and asks the most basic question you can ask the board. Is anyone there?
And then it moved. The planchette actually slid across the board, spelling out Y-E-S. Just imagine that moment. Suddenly, she's not alone anymore. And that initial jolt of shock, it turned right into excitement. She had to ask more.
And this next question, man, it just shows you where her head was at. It speaks volumes about her loneliness. She didn't ask who it was or what it wanted. She asked for the one thing she felt she was missing. The answer she got back, though, was designed to pull her right in.
It didn't just say yes, it spelled out boyfriend. The spirit told her it was a 19-year-old boy, and it started flattering her, telling her how beautiful she was, how she was different from other girls. For a lonely young woman, this was like a drug. She started to believe she'd actually found someone.
So for weeks, they talked every single day. Patty felt so close to this spirit that she finally asked it to show itself. The second she said the words, the lights in her room went crazy, flickering on and off. But then, just as suddenly, silence. The planchette went still. The game was officially over, and the real haunting was just about to begin.
After that day, that supposedly innocent connection Patty made through the board started to bleed into the real world. For the whole Donovan family, life was about to become an actual living nightmare. Look at how fast this thing escalated. This is a terrifyingly quick progression. First, it just sounds loud knocking coming from inside the walls. Then it starts attacking their senses. This awful smell of sulfur and rotting meat that would just appear out of nowhere. And then it gets physical. A thick red liquid looking a lot like blood starts pouring from every faucet in the house. This was all building to one final, terrifying assault.
And on March 31st, it just let loose. Imagine you're just trying to watch TV and a 6-foot, 100-kilo dresser just lifts off the floor and starts spinning in the air. Chairs, pictures of your family, they're flying around the room like missiles. The walls themselves seem to turn into this living black shadow, and the entire house is vibrating with this deep, guttural growl that is absolutely not of this world. This wasn't a haunting anymore. This was a war.
They did the only thing they could do. They ran. But it didn't matter. They check into a nearby hotel, and the same chaos starts all over again. Lights flickering, horrible screams, and they get thrown out. That's when the most horrifying realization must have hit them. This thing wasn't in the house. It was attached to them. There was no escape. With absolutely nowhere else to go, their home completely trashed, covered in strange fluids and graffiti, the Donovans made one last, desperate phone call to Ed and Lorraine Warren. The second the Warrens walked through the door, they knew the family story was true. They said the air felt suffocating. Ed would knock twice on a wall, and immediately 2 knocks would answer back from the inside. That disgusting smell was still there. And, yep, that red liquid was still pouring out of the taps. And this is where it gets really terrifying. Using her clairvoyant abilities, Lorraine didn't just sense the entity, she saw it. A massive black shadow just floating in the air with these piercing red eyes. She said she could literally feel her own energy, her life force, being drained away just by being in its presence. This wasn't some lost soul, this was a predator.
So with all the evidence, the Warrens delivered their diagnosis, and it was the absolute worst-case scenario. This was not a ghost. This was a demonic infestation. That means some kind of non-human entity had latched onto the family itself, and unlike a ghost, its only purpose was to cause pain and suffering until it completely destroyed them.
Lorraine knew right away that something this powerful doesn't just show up out of the blue. It had to be given permission, an invitation to enter their lives. And that's when a terrified and guilt-ridden Patty finally broke down and confessed everything about the Ouija board and her so-called spiritual boyfriend. Now the Warrens had the full picture. The whole teenage boy spirit thing was a lie, just a mask that something much older and much, much worse used to trick its way in. There was only one thing left to do: perform a formal exorcism. The second the priest began the ritual, the house became a war zone. The temperature dropped to freezing as every window in the room shattered inward. The black shadow materialized right in front of them, a vortex of pure hate, before it surged into Patty. She was lifted off the ground, her eyes glowing red, screaming in a voice that wasn't her own. Then, at the very peak of the ritual, some invisible force launched her across the room. She was thrown like a rag doll against the wall and just collapsed.
And in that exact instant, it all stopped. The violence just ceased. The growling was gone. That heavy, suffocating feeling in the air vanished. The house fell into this deep, almost unnatural silence. The fight was over. The entity was gone. But an ordeal this horrific? Well, it was going to leave a scar on the Donovan family forever. When Patty finally came to, she was herself again. She was free. The demonic presence was gone. And for the first time in weeks, when they turned on the faucet, the water ran clear. The family had their home back. More importantly, they had their lives back.
They survived, yes, but you don't just walk away from something like that. The psychological wounds, especially for Patty, would never fully heal. They stared right into the abyss, and they saw it stare back.
In the end, the Donovan case is a truly terrifying cautionary tale. It just goes to show that a simple search for connection, something born from loneliness, can sometimes crack open a door to something truly unimaginable. And that really leaves us with one last, haunting question to think about. Should some doors just always stay closed?
If you like this video, please subscribe the channel. Thank you.